Are you struggling with your email template that you actually use with execs? I mean, the actual structure of it. Are you getting feedback from your manager stating that, I need you to run all your email through me because I want to help you with your email? Yeah, they don't want to help you. They don't trust you. Well, in today's video, I'm going to go over a very specific template you can use to nail your executive communication where you don't have that issue, because it's a false belief that you can wing emails back to executives. I mean, they'll ask you a question and you think they're human, right? Executives are human. Who cares if they manage 20,000 employees? No, that's not the case at all. And today I'm going to show you a template so you can hit it every time. Let's go. My name is Milan Patel, and in the 30 years I've spent working my way to senior level in a Fortune 100 company, I have sent my fair share of executive emails, and I'll never forget how I flubbed it the very first time when I got into the tech industry. I mean, up to that point, I was in the military. I was sending communications to 2-star generals. Never had an issue. In the government, I sent plenty of communications up to senior leaders and never had an issue. Well, in the tech industry, I got my first question as a young tech engineer from the executive on an issue, and man, I spent 2 days going through the research. Boy, I went and researched, talked about 12 different people, typed up this massive summary of different things I found out to answer their question. My boss walks in the office not a day later, says, "Hey, Milan, I'm glad you copied me on that answer back to the executive. And, I just wanted to tell you, I thought I was going to get some awesome kudos, right?" No, not at all. As a matter of fact, I got this answer. "Well, Milan, from now on, you just need to send your executive responses through me so I can help you." There was no helping involved here. He clearly didn't trust me. And I realized right at that point, I must have done something, and I had to develop a better way to communicate with a template and a structure where an executive could understand immediately what they needed and they could get the answer back to me. So I'm going to give you the template that I use now. And don't feel the need to stop the video. At the end, I'll summarize it all on a single slide so you can actually take notes or take a screenshot. But let's start with the subject matter, the subject title. So remember, an executive might see hundreds of emails a day. And if they do, how do they know yours is important? So I always start the subject line with, what do I need from them? Action required, : decision required, : escalation potential, : and then a very quick title. That's important because as they're triaging their email, you need to let them know that it's important. Now, don't pull this unless it truly is important, because you don't want to be known as crying wolf for every issue. So if it requires it, then definitely do it, because if you're sending a mail to an executive, it's probably for a reason that's pretty darn important, right? That's otherwise you wouldn't be going to them, you'd be going to your manager. So once you have that, let's go to the body. The first thing in the body is the subject. Now, we don't want war and peace in the subject, right? They'll never get through it. 2 to 6 sentences is what we're talking about. I'll give a quick example. You're potentially going to receive an escalation because our customer X had extra unplanned downtime this quarter, and they're going to want to know how we're going to solve it for the next quarter. Very simple, straightforward, sets the context of the situation or issue, and it doesn't go into too much detail. Remember, they're triaging and scanning down. The next section is going to be the actual action required. Sometimes I use those words. In my previous video, I talk about the purpose of this email is to. Well, here you can use that, or I tend to use action required, : decision required, : Now that's important because you want to frame exactly what you want to get back for them. In this example that I used, I'm going to say, decision required. Need you to make a decision on options 1, 2, or 3 below. Okay, now the executive knows at the end of this email, they need to respond agreeing to one of these options. So you let them know now in a logical manner what's coming next, which is they need to make a decision. So after that, you have the optional section called options. Now, why is it optional? Well, again, in escalation, you might not have a lot of options. But in this one, let's say I have 3 options. I have option 1, 2, and 3. Now, an important piece to this is list out in those options what the pros, cons, and risks are. That's important, and I'll talk more about this later in the pro tip, is because if you don't detail that out, how do they know to make a decision? Because remember, they're probably flying way up here in terms of detail. So Give them some business decision-making criteria of the benefits, the costs, and the risks for each of the options. Very important. The one after that then is, what's your recommendation? Recommendation colon. You should have a recommendation. I mean, these are your options. You pull these together. Because if you don't, what are you going to do? Lick their finger and take the wind and say, oh, the wind's blowing from the east, I'll go with option 2. No, all that's going to do is erode their confidence in you. You want them to know that you've done your diligence and your research for the right thing for the business or the customer here. So then after the options and recommendations, you have another optional section, which I'll call risks. In the case of an escalation, there may not be options, but there will be risks. So if you need it, you can put that section in there. Otherwise, you're going to cover it with the options. Or if there's general risks that cover all of them, instead of putting them in each line, you can say these risks cover the entire gamut of the options above. Again, it's dealer's choice at that point. Now, the final section is a really interesting section, because this is the one that can actually hurt you or help you in the long run, and that is the detailed supporting data. Now, you have these 3 options, right? But this goes into a bit of a sidebar of what I call, TYL, which is train your leader. So when you're new to an organization, they don't know how you think. They don't know the things that you actually think about when you're making options. So this is a very important section on how you can actually start training your leader on how you think to build confidence in your decisions and your options, and also build confidence in you as a leader, because they want to know that the people that are working for them, like in my case, I'm just paranoid enough, and they get that when I look at these different potential issues that could happen, and I put that in the detailed supporting data. So that is the overall structure. So here I'm going to pop them all up for you before I get to the pro tip. And if you're finding this information useful, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell. And forward it to somebody who may be starting out, who just doesn't know where to start, so you can keep them out of trouble. Now, the pro tip is this: that detailed summary section, overload it when you're early in a new organization or working with a new leader. Give them more data. Use that to train them on all the different things you think about. I always overload it. I always make it longer than it needs to be with all the data I find, because again, I'm training them on how I think. And if you don't train them on how you think, they're always going to wonder, how deeply do they think about these issues? Are they looking at all the different angles? Well, you can train them over time to do that. Now then, over time, you can then start cutting it back. That's right. You cut it back to the point where they cry for mercy, meaning they ask you a question. Because as they get to know your thought process, you don't need to give the data, because they know you're thinking about that based on your prior emails. So you get to the point where they ask a question, oh, new baseline. Drop it back down a little bit and then lock it there. That is how you tune it to every executive that you work for. And every executive is going to be a little different with the amount of detail that they're comfortable with. And I can tell you over time, as an example, I almost don't have to put a lot of supporting detail down there anymore, because I've trained my executives. They know I think of certain things based on the previous ones I did. I hope this has been helpful to you and to others that may need a starting point. Until next time.